Thank you all for joining us for the Demystifying of Purpose and Personal Statements for Graduate Law and Medical School Applications, Part 2. Presenting for us today is Erin Tody, the Assistant Director and Writing Consultant under the McNair Scholar Program at Iowa State University. I will now hand it over to Erin to get us started, and thank you for sharing your expertise today, Erin.
Today's workshop is going to be much more interactive and asking you to connect with your peers and talking about your statement of purpose or personal statement that you are working on. I want to go over just a couple of logistics, first of all, to make sure we're all on the same page. Let me share my screen real quick. So this is a link to a Google Drive folder with all of the files that we're using. So today's presentation, the presentation from 2 weeks ago, and all of the worksheets, including the brainstorming worksheets we're going to use today. So I'm going to give you a minute and either scan the QR code to go to the drive, or actually, sorry, wrong one, or go to this tiny URL. So that you can actually access all these materials. If you're having any problems accessing, let me know and I can make sure to get you the resources. The other thing I wanted to make sure that you all had access to is the resource that I created about statements of purpose. This is the same resource that I introduced 2 weeks ago. But if you are applying specifically to a graduate school, a PhD, or a master's program, this is a freely available resource for you to use. If you have friends that are applying to a graduate program and want some guidance, please share this link with them. It is intentionally a freely available resource for anyone who's interested in those master's and doctoral programs. The resource is going through just a few more revisions, but should be going to its final publication in the next couple of weeks. So it should be finalized here before the end of this semester. So just make sure that you have those 2 links. So I want to start today by doing a check-in. I'm interested in hearing more about how your writing is going. And I want to know what is going well and maybe what are you finding challenging. So if you want to take a minute, put your responses to this in the chat. I just want to get a sense of where we are at. Yeah, Catherine, go ahead.
So I think overall my statement of purpose is going well. But the main note that I was getting from like one of my professors, the GRA mentor in the writing center, was like not being afraid to like sort of brag about myself in the right sort of ways, which is definitely something that I just in general have some trouble doing.
That's a real challenge, Catherine. I appreciate you sharing that because you're not alone in that. What I hope we can remember as we move through this today and as you keep moving forward is that you have really valuable and meaningful experience that has helped you get to this point to understand what you think you want your next steps to be. And stating the things that you've done and explaining how they've been meaningful or influential or valuable is not bragging. That's just stating the truth. And so bragging is really making these very grandiose statements without anything to back it up, or positioning yourself as better than others, but simply identifying the cool things you've done and showing enthusiasm. I don't think you're going to move into that space of bragging. I hope that's helpful, but just know you're not alone in that. How about anyone else? How are you feeling about your personal statement writing? What's going well? What challenges are happening? But I think that it's important to address the fact that writing these statements can be really challenging. It can be very emotional sometimes. It can be frustrating. It can also be really liberating. And so if you are feeling like you need some sort of guidance or some moment to help you move forward, what I will recommend you do is look at this resource. Actually, in chapter 8, there's a section called Words of Wisdom. And so there's a list of, or there's about 6 different students that I've worked with who reflected on their experience, and they share their words of wisdom for moving through writing the statement of purpose. And so anytime you're feeling stuck, I'd maybe encourage you to look at what they've written. They're very wise statements, and I think also very, very human reflections. So today we are going to talk about doing some brainstorming. Before we move to brainstorming, I want to just remind us about what we're trying to do in this statement of purpose. So if you remember a conversation from last week, whether you were in person or whether you saw it on YouTube, you'll remember that we talked about the statement of purpose trying to achieve three things. Writers talk about their relevant experiences, they talk about their motivation, and they talk about their fit to program. Now, this is specifically for master's and PhD programs. For those of you who are interested in applying to health sciences or law school, you don't need to address the fit to program necessarily, but you're still making a connection between the relevant experiences you've had and your motivation to pursue the particular degree. For health sciences, you're answering the question, why do you want to be a doctor? Why do you want to be a physician's assistant? For law school, it's really about showing this commitment to the law and that career path. So we're going to do a peer review activity, but before we do that, can I get a show of hands of how many people actually have a complete or a draft that they can use for peer review? Catherine, we are going to do peer review on your draft today, but we're going to have multiple people do peer review on your draft. Is that something you're okay with? Okay, we'll figure out the logistics of that in just a minute. But before we dive in and do peer review on that, I'd like to know what experiences you all have with peer review. If you've done it before, what made it effective? What made it ineffective? So you're welcome to either put things into the chat, and I'd encourage everyone on the call to participate. What made it effective? What made it ineffective? You can put this into the chat. You can also unmute yourself and share.
I've done like creative writing workshops before. That is my minor right now. That's probably the biggest sort of peer review that I've had. And in that sort of space, I present my work and then I'm not really saying much, and it's just other people sort of telling me what they got from my creative work. So I'm assuming a slightly different layout than like the peer review that we're going to be doing today. But I do find it helpful because having different, like what I always describe as sets of eyes looking at the same like creative project in that way can help me as the creator catch things that I wouldn't have caught otherwise because I was the one staring at it for like the longest period of time. So having that fresh perspective can be super helpful.
Absolutely. Yeah, so creative writing workshops do have like a very particular sort of format that they can follow. I think you'll see some elements of that in the way I structure this. You might also see something that's a little bit different. But going in with this idea that, well, a reader can tell me what they're seeing, what they're understanding. That can open up opportunities for where there might be confusion, and that's something I can address. That is the power of peer review, right? Because you know what you want to say. And you see that in your draft. Or it can be harder to see where that might be missing. Okay. Anyone else on the call? How have you used peer review? And how has it been effective, or how has it been ineffective? So we are very lucky that we have a writing center expert on this call, Dr. Erin Zimmerman. And so of course I'll be interested in any sort of thoughts, Erin, you want to throw into the chat. I'm skipping ahead. Has anybody engaged in ineffective peer review before? Has anyone ever been given feedback? Okay, Elia, talk to us about this. What made it ineffective?
Really, it was the oversaturation of positive feedback rather
Oh,
than, constructive feedback, like reviewing the drawbacks, like what I need to improve on, which I guess is common considering that I'm in like the counseling field and we all want to, make each other feel good,
mhm. That's such a good point, right? That we want to identify when someone has done something well, because then that makes sure that they do it again. But we also want to engage in peer review where we have directions forward. And that's really one of the best things, or the best ways to frame peer review, is that we're providing that direction forward for the writer. So you can provide really constructive feedback that is really critical, but they see how they can move forward with those revisions. If we only talk about how great someone's doing on their draft, somebody doesn't necessarily have directions for revision. And then it can seem a little bit insincere if it is only, this is amazing, this is amazing. We're going to look at the chat. Yes. Okay, so Dr. Zimmerman talks about how feedback without any explanation for why something is not working or something is working or not working is not super helpful. I want to know why, so I know what to keep doing or know how to rethink what I've done. Absolutely. So if anybody's ever gotten feedback on their paper where there was just like a question mark or just something that was like bad or good or yes or no, what does that mean? Why yes? Why no? Why good? Why bad? What does a question mark mean? Yes, those are the worst comments. That's not what we advocate for those of us in the writing center field. But this idea of, I see you doing this, and I really like this effect that it creates, but I have questions about this statement because I'm confused about this thing. Now, sometimes I can make comments a little bit longer, but it engages in that interaction between the reader and the writer. So that's really what we're looking for when we're thinking about effective feedback versus ineffective. And that's what I'd like us to think about today. So when I think about effective peer review, I'm thinking about feedback that is specific, it's focused, it's supportive, encouraging, honest, and clear. And feedback can be all of those things. It can be really honest, and it can also be really supportive, and it is very specific and very focused on one part. Effective peer review or effective feedback offers a direction for revision. So rather than saying something like, well, your thesis sucks, what's the direction for revision there? Just throw the thesis away and start over? Or what about it is unclear or needs to be revised or needs to be clarified or expanded or simplified? Not that you need to have a thesis in this paper, it's just an example. Effective peer review provides a reader's perspective, right? You're saying, here's what I'm understanding as a reader. Is that matching what you're trying to do as a writer? And effective peer review also identifies what the writer has done well and where they can improve, right? So as Elia was saying, if we have way too much positive feedback and not enough of the constructive, that feels really unbalanced. But effective peer review is working to do both. So this is the lens through which we're going to think about engaging in this peer review activity today. Look at the chat real quick. Okay, I'm going to read Dr. Zimmerman's comments because I think they're really, really helpful here. So she talks about how our writing consultants strive to cover what, why, how, and do in feedback. What does the reader see? Why is that working or not for the reader's understanding or encouragement or engagement, excuse me? How could the writer adjust? What can the writer do to make that adjustment, right? So we're thinking about getting into both identifying the what and then what are those specific steps forward. And yeah, as Dr. Zimmer was saying, you don't have to do that for every single comment, but that lens, I think, through which we're approaching giving feedback can help us move into a more constructive and meaningful space. So for peer review today, we are going to ask Catherine, if you're okay with it, because it looks like we're just doing peer review on Catherine's draft, unless anyone else who has joined recently has an actual draft. But Catherine, if you're okay with it, I'm going to ask you to share this draft with us. Maybe via chat would be easiest. And I think we can all understand that this draft will just be shared for the purposes of peer review, and then we can send Catherine the feedback and then delete it for privacy. What I'm going to ask everyone to do is read this draft all the way through. So just start by reading to get a sense of where Catherine is starting, where she's moving through the draft and where she's finishing. And then there are questions in the worksheet, and I'll upload that to it's in the Google Drive folder, but I'll also just make sure to put that in the chat. I'd like you to use the worksheet to guide your feedback so that you're staying focused on giving feedback in the areas of experiences, motivation, and fit to program. And then after we've read through and made some notes, then I think we can discuss this feedback with Catherine, hopefully in a very non-overwhelming way, but discuss sort of what we're understanding and maybe some very specific directions. Catherine, we're really putting you on the spot, so I'm wondering if you have any questions or concerns right now.
I'm mostly just trying to figure out how best, to share it. Sorry.
No,
Just
that's
trying to
okay.
figure out how best to share it with you guys. Because I think just putting it in the chat is making it too long. Do you want me to just share like the first chunk of it?
Is it possible for you to upload a file into the chat?
I might be able to do that. Let me check.
Or if anyone else has, if it's in a Google Doc, you could share it that way.
Okay. I can do that. That'll probably be easiest actually.
Okay. And is this for a master's program, PhD program, law school, or med school?
Master's in Hispanic Studies.
Okay. So what
What
I'm
email
gonna,
should I share with?
why don't you go ahead and share it with me?
Okay.
Selena, I know that you just joined recently. Do you have a draft that you are ready to receive feedback on?
I don't actually.
Okay. I just did not want to exclude you if you felt
Oh,
like you were ready for feedback.
actually, could it be like anything?
Um, it could be, when you say anything, tell me more about what you mean by that.
Yeah, does it have to be like a specific like research paper or
So we're doing peer review for a
mm,
statement of purpose or a
oh,
personal statement.
okay. I think I do have something. Let me just double check. Let me get back to you in like 2 minutes.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
fine. If that's the case, then we can divide and conquer sounds really aggressive, but divide up the work. Okay. So while Catherine is working on sharing that, I am going to make sure you all have access to
So
the
I have,
file.
oh, sorry, I have
Oh
two
no, go ahead, go
possible
ahead.
things. I do have a personal statement for social work. And also I'm gonna do like I'm gonna apply for the CSN commencement speech. So I have those two.
Okay, tell me more about this personal statement for social work.
It's just kind of like to get in the program.
Okay, so let's go ahead and do some peer review for that one
Okay.
also. Um, okay, so let's go ahead and do this. Selena, I'm gonna ask you to give feedback on Catherine's draft. Catherine, I'm gonna ask you to give feedback on Selena's draft when it comes up into the chat. And I was gonna have us go into breakout rooms, but rather than breakout rooms, I think we'll just all stay together and we can do feedback this way. If Shantae and Elia and Dr. Zimmerman, if you want to give feedback on any of the drafts and participate, fabulous. If that is not where you are at, not a problem. For the other two participants on this call, Dionisio and Sarah, I would ask you maybe Dionisio to pick Catherine's and then Sarah to pick Selena's. Just that way everybody is getting a little bit of different feedback. Does that sound okay to everybody? So as you're starting to think about engaging in peer review, feel free to make sure you're muted, feel free to turn off your camera. Let's spend like 15 minutes or so on this activity to see where we're at. And then we'll check back in and I want to make sure we have some time to talk through the feedback. Okay, go ahead and finish the last piece of feedback that you're making. And if you were using the brainstorming worksheet, you'll see that the questions really ask you to think about motivation, fit to program, and experiences. And we're really thinking about the content and the organization here. So in the feedback we're going to be giving, I'd like us to focus on that content and organization and questions we might have. We aren't going to focus on language or word choice or punctuation because that's not where we're at in the writing. And that's not the main purpose for today. So let's go ahead and give feedback to Catherine first. So anybody who read Catherine's draft, what's some feedback that you would like to share with her about her draft?
I thought Catherine's, it's kind of hard because I'm on my phone, but I got to read, let me see, I got to read Catherine's and I really liked the flow of it. Like the beginning, middle, and where she sees herself in the future. She has a very interesting story, and I really enjoyed reading it, honestly. It was very like captivating, and yeah, I really enjoyed it. And then something, let me see. I didn't get to read the very last part. I'm just finishing up the last two sentences. But yeah, I really enjoyed the flow of it. It got me very, how should I say it? Very entertained the entire time, and I was like, I want to read more. I want to read more. So I enjoyed it.
Selena, can you identify what
Yeah.
made you want to read more? What was it that Catherine was doing that made you
Yeah.
want to read more?
Yeah, I think personally because I can relate to her a little bit because also I'm bilingual, so I can see myself in some of the things that she mentioned, and just how like speaking Spanish, how it can open like many doors, and how she wants to contribute that into her career. That's something that I also look to do, to work with the Spanish speaking community. So I felt like I can relate to her.
So I think, Selena, this is helpful for us to hear because what I'm hearing you say is that because Catherine was personal and specific about her experiences,
Mhm.
we can start to see this human in the document. It's not just a broad blanket statement that can be applied to anybody.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Do you have any directions for revision? Something that you were curious about, you wanted to know more about, or something that was unclear?
Yeah, I kind of wanted to know just a little bit more how she mentioned she was a tattoo artist. So I know she was just explaining her journey, how she took a break for personal reasons. And I kind of wanted to know a little bit more how that came about. But after that, the flow just kept going. So it was nice.
Okay. Anyone else who read Catherine's statement that has some feedback to offer? So Catherine, one thing I would encourage you to continue to think about and keep exploring in your draft, and I had a chance to skim through it really quick, is maybe some more specifics about why you're interested in this master's program and how you see it benefiting your professional goals. I know you talk about sort of this interest in maybe teaching or becoming an educator, but can you make that a little bit more specific about what that could look like? Um, and which faculty are you excited about? What is it about this master's program? Because it looks like I was looking online, it looks like it's a pretty flexible program and there are actually like two different tracks. So what is it about this program that is going to help you achieve your career goals? And then I think that also requires you to be even more specific with what is it that you want to do once you have this master's degree? Or does that mean that then there's a PhD on the horizon? So I think maybe digging into that. I would also encourage you now, depending on the prompt and depending on how much, like how many words you can actually use, to think about are there other professional experiences that are related to professional or educational that are related to your use of Spanish in this way, your interest in Spanish linguistics, Spanish culture, where you could talk about how, in the classroom you've explored this, or if you've had research experiences or other experiences. That's not to say these other experiences are not beneficial. And I think it's interesting how you tie your work as a tattoo artist to your use of Spanish, but I'm wondering if you can show this commitment to your coursework also and how that has helped you move along. something to think about and explore a little bit more. Okay. Catherine, do you have any questions for us after receiving this sort of preliminary set of feedback?
No, I don't think so. It's super helpful, and I do need to kind of think about my academic career as a whole a little more and kind of working that in because from my point of view, I'm coming almost fresh off of like a 5-year break from school, so my professional experience is a lot kind of more prevalent on the mind.
Okay.
But it's just as valid to draw from my, academic experience before that 5-year break as well as the like last year or so after coming back. So I'm definitely going to put a little more thought into including some more of like those aspects of my history and the way that ties into like what I want to do and be more specific about what I want to do and why I want to do it. And that's
Awesome. That sounds like a great plan, and I appreciate you articulating what your next steps are because that's your homework from today's workshop is planning what are those next steps you're going to take to actually implement this feedback. Okay, let's go ahead. I know this is a really short conversation, but I think it's sort of modeling a little bit of what peer review can do. Let's go ahead and give feedback to Selena and her draft.
Yeah, so I really enjoyed how thorough she was about her personal history and how that sort of set up her motivations behind what her career goals are. And how specific she was at the end on like what her career goal is about wanting to start the nonprofit, with helping the Hispanic community assimilate and take care of their own health and ability to kind of gain their bearings in, society here in the US, which can be very tricky for a whole variety of reasons. My in-laws are from Mexico, so I have some personal experience with, trying to help my in-laws in that same way. And having that sort of centralized resource will be something that's incredibly useful. So I liked how specific she was about what her goals were. Um, I feel like in the beginning, she could almost condense the first 2 paragraphs, I think, a little bit to make it like one more cohesive, like personal history and how that leads into kind of the skills she ended up developing, why those skills would be useful for the program, because the rest of it flows pretty well from there. But I think just kind of creating a little more cohesion in that intro will kind of keep that nice flow throughout the whole work and really highlight why her personal background is so helpful and motivating for what she wants to do, why she wants to go to get into social work, and why that would be helpful for her eventual goals of starting a nonprofit.
So I do actually, Selena, I have a question, and this might turn into a couple questions for you. Are you seeing specific prompts, or are you following specific prompts as you're writing this personal statement?
No, I think I was just trying to answer the questions. I think it was like 3 questions that were provided, and then I
Okay.
just did my own thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the reason I ask about that is because I have seen that social work programs often have much lengthier prompts and often allow much lengthier statements. Now, that's a generalization. Please double check that for each school. But there's usually a set of questions that you need to answer. And so before I would really dig into giving you feedback, I would want to make sure that we have a guiding prompt. I would also encourage you to think about making this specific for a specific social work program. And if you're not at that stage, that's totally fine in your writing, but I think that would be a very clear next step. Let's say you're applying to a social work program at, I don't know, University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. What would it be about that specific program that makes you want to go there? Is it because the faculty of certain areas? Is it because the structure of the program, the research areas or emphasis of the program, or there's something unique about the location that relates to the work you want to do? So really sort of digging into the specificity. I think that these social work personal statements do often ask you to be quite vulnerable and to share a lot about your own lived experiences. I'll echo the same guidance I gave a couple weeks ago in that there is value in sharing your story and sharing parts of your identity, especially as it influences the work you want to do. I also want you to think about, what are you comfortable sharing with an admissions committee versus what might you not feel comfortable sharing, and recognizing that that might shift as the landscape is shifting. So just something to keep in mind. I do see, though, how your lived experiences are related to these larger career goals. I even think you might be able to strengthen that a little bit more and dig in deeper. And then I think that next step is to really think about, how is social work as a degree going to really help you do the thing you want to do? Now, for somebody who's in social work, that might be a fairly obvious assumption they can make, but I think they really want to understand how you see a social work degree supporting this goal you have of creating a nonprofit organization, which I think is a really, really cool goal. And I love how human-centered this is. It's going to be important for a social work degree, but I think you can make that even more explicit so people don't have to guess, right? You're just delivering it right to them. Do you have any questions about that feedback?
No, that was very helpful, honestly, because I do find myself reflecting on that most of the time. I'm like, okay, once I get this degree, like now what, like where do I really see myself? And I do plan on going to grad school, and that's a conversation that came up yesterday, yeah, like yesterday with one of my mentors. And I feel like I want to do a lot of things, but obviously I can't. So I really have to like narrow it down and really like she was like, do you see yourself doing that in 5 years, so I think that was very good feedback, how I can strengthen those points a little bit. And how you said like kind of explain, don't like get myself like in a third person's point of view, because I know why I want to do it, maybe just elaborate a little bit more on that. So that's very helpful. Yeah, thank you.
You're very welcome. Yeah, I think this is one of the hard parts, right? And we've alluded to this earlier. You know what you want to say. The connections make sense to you. It's your lived experience, but other people aren't going to necessarily understand that connection. And so your job here is to really make that very direct, very explicit, pull the pieces together to help someone understand, that's what they did, and that's why they want to go in this direction. I can see how this all fits now. So Aaron, Dr. Zimmerman has also posted something in the chat. Selena, I'll direct you to look at that when you get a chance. I won't read it all. But I think I both want to say that for Catherine and Selena, you have really interesting starts to your draft. What you have spent time doing is valuable, and you have a very good basis upon which you can expand and get more in depth and more specific. And this is a very common part of your writing process. And so I'm glad to see that you are at this point with your drafts.
Thank you. Thank you all.
You're very welcome. Yeah, and thank you for everyone for giving feedback. As we're thinking about wrapping up, I'd like us to think about, what are our next steps. I'm going to go ahead and just share my screen again really quickly. Because it can sometimes be a little bit overwhelming to receive feedback and then think about, oh gosh, what am I going to do next? I have all this feedback now. So what I want you to think about moving forward, and you can do this right now or right after the workshop or later. So I want you to think about, okay, how are you going to tackle these revisions? What are you going to prioritize? And then what steps do you need to take in order to actually accomplish these revisions? So for example, if we've given you recommendations on making this even more specific to the specific program, how are you going to do that? And just sitting down and trying to make it more specific, that's kind of vague. What's your first step going to be? Is it going to be to go back to the school's website to do some more digging and reading? There's a reading-writing connection here you need to explore. Is it going to be going back to brainstorming about your motivation and then linking that to the specific information? So trying to be specific here so that you can move forward in a meaningful way and that you have some meaningful steps. So that's what I recommend as sort of your next steps as you move forward with the revision. Because we are right about at time, I'll go ahead and end here for today. But I want to open it up to whatever questions or comments anyone has at this point. Okay, so with suggestion for length when there's no writing guide. Oh, that's fun. If there's no guide, I recommend 500 to 1,000 words. I would say if you're going over two pages single space, that's probably way longer than anyone wants to read. If you're under 500 words, you haven't fully developed your ideas. I would say aim for somewhere in the middle, aim for 700, 750-ish words. And I think you would be right within those expectations. Yeah. Sometimes when you create an account on a school's website, they might tell you, oh, here's how long it can be. That won't open up until early September for master's and PhD programs. But at least if you're aiming for that between 500 and 1,000, you're within the ballpark. All right. Well, thank you all for joining. Thank you so much, Catherine and Selena, for bringing these drafts, for sharing them, for engaging in peer review. I really appreciate your willingness to share your work with your peers. Feel free to go back to your Google Docs and reset permissions so that only you have access to them. But I can also hop on and give you feedback if that's something you like. Just feel free to send me an email. Okay, well, thanks everyone. Have a very lovely rest of your day, and don't hesitate to reach out if you've got questions. My email is once again in the chat, and I'm very happy to support you as I can. Happy writing with your statements, and I hope it goes well.
Yes, thank you everyone for joining us, and thank you, Erin, for, as always, providing your lovely expertise, sharing your time, and giving us all this fabulous advice. Thank you so much.